Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Cecilia with me, and we're going to be talking all about the parallels between what we're starting to see with sustainability and lessons that we maybe should have learned from the first wave of digital transformation. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody an introduction?
Sure. I'm Cecilia Edwards. I'm a partner at Wavestone, which is a global management consulting firm that focuses on helping large enterprises with complex transformations. Most recently, I've been doing a lot of work on digital transformation and or over the years have done a lot of work on digital transformation and sustainability transformations. And as we think about what's happening with Gen AI, you can see that the parallels of everything that we went through from a digital transformation perspective are relevant. And so I am spending some of my time helping clients think through those types of issues today.
So what I want to start the conversation with goes back to more on the digital transformation side. And when we were prepping for this discussion, we started talking about like transformation as an idea has been going on for a very long time. And it was always something that was a challenge for organizations. But then when we snuck this word digital into it, we started to see success rates actually dropping as opposed to improving. So can you talk through maybe what you think the cause for that like drop off on success rate was when we started thinking through digital and technology transformations?
Sure. And just to add a little bit on this, the failure rates from the transformations, right? There's this number that has persisted for over 20 years, which is just amazing, which is about 2/3, so 67% of all business transformations fail to deliver the results that the business results that the companies intended. So 2/3 fail. And you think that now that we are in an age of persistent transformation, and that you have this digital component added onto it, now that we're in that phase, you would expect that we're pretty good at transformations and that the success rates would go up. But what we've seen is once digital transformation happened, success rates went down. So the failure rates are now about 80-85% by others' estimates. So it increased quite significantly. One of the reasons I think that happened is because we think about the technology first. When you think about digital transformation, everybody says, oh, what's the tool that I need? And if you think about the tool first and miss the business objectives, you end up with a disconnect. You end up with solutions that have been put in place that are nice gee whiz things, but aren't designed to actually deliver the results that you want. You end up with tools that are in place that don't align with the skill sets that your organization has, or you haven't thought through the change management and those things. So it is this tendency to look at the technology, which is a huge enabler of business transformation. I mean, that's why we do it, right? So it's a huge enabler, but we start with the technology, we increase the failure rates.
So now I want to talk about some of the lessons then that we could have learned from pre-digital transformations to what we should have been learning over the last number of years of transformations, and just talk about like what are some of the key principles that drive success across all type of change and transformation within an organization.
Yeah, so if you're going to think about transformation versus change, right, then I think that that's where the difference comes in. Historically, we've thought of change as the organization's current state is frozen. I'm going to unfreeze it for a while. I'm going to do a bunch of steps and execute some type of change program that I've predefined. And then once that change is in place, I'm going to lock everything down and freeze it again for the next extended period of time. Well, the era of that type of change management is gone. Where we are today is in continuous transformation. But what happens is people are sometimes using old school change management techniques. They tend to think that they were going to look at their current state first. They're going to spend a lot of time really understanding my current state, figuring out what's right about that, figuring out what's wrong. And somehow we're going to come up with a solution, a roadmap of where we'd like to go. The challenge with that is you come up with incremental solutions. You actually don't come up with anything that's transformative. So you're underutilizing the value. You're spending time on things that don't actually move the needle. So I think that the first lesson to learn is that you need to focus on the vision first. Where do I want to end up long term? Focus on that first. And then if I were to achieve that, what are the elements that of my business that impact that, and what would those need to look like? Only after you've defined the overall vision and you've identified what your business elements need to look like in order to achieve that, then you come back to the current state. And then it's pretty simple. You ask the question of how far from my targeted future state is my current state, and what's the game plan to get there? That leads you to more transformation. The second lesson that I think is pretty important is really around a shared vision. Oftentimes people say, oh, we got to move really quickly. This is happening with Gen AI now. Oh, we got to get this, chat GPT implemented. We have to get Microsoft Copilot implemented. We have to, here's a tool. Don't I need to hurry up and get it implemented? And the fastest way to business impact often is to slow it down a little bit. You understand that those tools are there, but slow it down, build the shared vision, take the time to make sure that all of the leaders are on the same page, make sure that they understand what the potential is, what the implications are going to be for the organization's culture, for your innovation, for your performance metrics, for your delivery model. Spend the time to understand and get everybody on the same page. And then you can get to your targeted outcomes significantly faster. So this is this kind of go slow to get outcomes really quickly. So it seems a bit contradictory, but that actually leads to faster implementation all along the way. And go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that you brought that up, because the vision is like something that I think is talked about a lot, but often skipped over because it's almost seen as like the ooey gooey part of it, as opposed to like the hard science of being successful. But to your point, like, you're not ever going to get there if you're constantly looping around this idea of people not knowing where or why you're going there. And so I just love that you like drove that point forward, because that's something that I talk about on a regular basis as well.
And what we see, Emma, happening is if you don't spend enough time doing that, people start making one-off decisions. Oh, but I want to do that a little bit differently. And somebody says, well, okay. And if you say okay to the next tweak and okay to the next tweak, and before you realize it, you're nowhere near where you intend to head. And you come up again with another transformation that fails to deliver the business outcomes. Right.
So during the first question, you mentioned this idea that we often start with technology. And I would love to get a little bit of your insight on maybe how we're repeating that same mindset of starting with technology, but in our sustainability efforts and the way that we're approaching trying to solve this problem now. So can you talk through that idea a little bit?
Yeah, so from a sustainability perspective, it has a slightly different flavor, but I think it still holds. One of the things that we're looking at from a sustainability perspective is we say, how do I reduce my carbon emissions? So what are the things that I can do? Oh, can I get an EV? And that'll reduce my carbon emissions. But we haven't really thought through the fact that I have to plug that in. It needs electricity to be generated somewhere. What's the electricity source? Oh, fossil fuels are doing that. So have I or have I not actually solved the problem when I got the EV? Where are the raw materials coming from to make the batteries, right? And I certainly am not EV bashing because I own one, right? But it's the idea that we're going to latch on to a piece of the solution without thinking through all of the elements that need to change. If you tell me as a consumer that I need to eat locally, well, I can drive or walk or bike a mile away to my local grocery store, and I'm going to buy what's in the store. And I actually don't control whether or not the food that is sold in my local market is local. And so then we need to think through, okay, well, what is the system that we're going to put in place? What's the rest of what we need to do to be successful? Even telling people that they need to eat vegetarian. Well, if we don't change from single crop planting, we're going to have, because agriculture is a huge contributor to climate change issues. And so if we don't think through the rest of that system, we're going to fail to achieve the outcomes. So you see all of these CSR activities, you see all of these single point solutions because, oh, it sounds really good. This idea, this one piece sounds really good. And we decide that we need to have that solution before we've thought through, well, what am I really trying to accomplish? What's the best way to do this? What are all of the rest of the elements in the ecosystem that are needed or that are dependent upon achieving that vision, that outcome? And until we decide that we have to look at this in a more comprehensive way, in a more transformative way, as opposed to individual projects, got to switch the thinking to say, this is a transformation. This is personal transformation. This is business transformation. This is our economies need to transform. Until we start thinking about it from a transformation perspective and stop thinking about it as these individual point solutions that we think sound good, we aren't going to move the needle as much as we need to.
That like phrase point solution applied to this context makes that analogy back to digital transformation so much stronger by thinking through it in that way. And you're spot on. It's the same thing as going out and trying to find a specific piece of technology that you can bring in to solve this one problem, but realizing that it doesn't matter if that piece of the puzzle is there, if the whole rest of it is missing.
Exactly.
So I love the way that you use that language to kind of help bridge that analogy and hopefully give people some food for thought on how they're approaching all types of transformation within their business. But thank you so much for joining me for the discussion. And for anybody who's watching us, if you're not already, make sure you go follow Cecilia. She's got a podcast and lots of great content coming out on these types of topics as well. So make sure you give her a follow. And thank you again for joining me and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks for having me, Emma. Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.